From ancient pieces of a 400 million year old piece of technology to underground fighter jets, here are 10 of the most incredible and mysterious archaeological finds ever. Puquio. In the dry valleys of southern Peru, an area famous for the mysterious Nazca lines, there lies another mystery to behold known as Puquio. That's right, there is more to the landscape than the large spiraling lines through the valley. An underground network of ancient aqueducts can be found containing trenches, tunnels, and wells that bring water from the underground up to the surface. Thought to have been constructed by the same people who created the Nazca geoglyphs, many of the aqueducts are still used by the inhabitants of the valley today. Spiraling funnel-shaped holes called ojos can be seen on the surface, with some as wide as 50 feet, 15 meters, at the opening. They provided access to the water in the tunnel as well as serving as entrances for cleaning and maintenance. The wells also allowed wind into the canals to force the water through the system. The lower end of the system has open trenches that allowed the public to access it for drinking water, for bathing, and for washing clothes. They also used it as a channel for agricultural purposes. Although archaeologists have known about these aqueducts for a long time, they had not been able to pinpoint their age. Because they are made from the same materials as the surrounding terrain, it was difficult to carbon date them. They first appeared in historical text in 1605 from the writings of a Spanish Catholic priest, but some archaeologists believe that they could have been built by pre-Columbian people around 540 CE to combat prolonged droughts that struck the area at the time, with some possibly as old as 3,000 years or as recent as 1,250 years. These unique structures still hold many secrets buried underground. Wheel of the Gods. A prehistoric stone monument found in the Middle East that originally went unnoticed for centuries is now believed to have been used for gruesome sky burials. The monument, known as Gilgal Rephaim in the Golan Heights region, is roughly as old as Stonehenge, but archaeologists still don't know why it was built or who built it. Some theorize it was an ancient calendar or sky burial site where dead bodies were placed on top of stone mounds to be picked apart by vultures. It was first spotted by archaeologists who were doing an aerial survey of the region in 1967. Its concentric stone circles were what first caught their eye, but a number of later excavations revealed it to be one of the oldest and largest structures in the region. Flint tools and shards of pottery were also found there and helped to date the site, with some scholars agreeing construction could have started as early as 3500 BC. Its name, which means stone heap of the wildcat, has a 15-foot, 4.5 meters high burial chamber at the center of 5 circles, the largest of which measures more than 500 feet, 160 meters wide. Made from thousands of smaller rocks that together weigh over 40,000 tons, the monument still has many mysteries to behold. When standing inside the complex, it resembles a labyrinth of crumbling stones. Some still wonder whether the structure was built around its central burial mound or whether it was added later on. Either way, the impressive site is believed to have been constructed by a nomadic civilization in the area, which still lends an air of mystery to this huge monument. Who do you think it is? Could it just be a burial site for the mysterious sky burial? Or could there be some type of mysterious alternative purpose? Could this even have been a prehistoric landing pad for extraterrestrial spacecraft? It seems unlikely, but no one knows for sure. Let me know your opinion in the comments below, and after that be sure to click the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you like learning about these archaeological discoveries, you'll love the other videos that are in store. Obsidian Monkey Jar. Mexico's National Anthropology Museum has many interesting and ancient items in its collections, but the origin of one of its most famous objects is still up for debate. An exquisite jar made from obsidian, a black stone, shows a monkey holding its tail above its head. Measuring 6 inches, 15 centimeters high, the jar was first showcased in the museum's first major catalog 50 years ago, and was described by Mexican archaeologist and historian Ramon Piñachón as one of the most valuable pieces in the museum and an absolute unique model. But some still question what the jar actually depicts, and its construction is even more puzzling. The vessel features a stylized monkey and is smoothly polished. But how would ancient people such as the Aztecs have been able to not only carve the jar with such intricate details, but to also polish it to such a pristine shine? Stone effigy vessels were usually created from a single piece of stone that was cut from the raw material using strings. Further cutting, drilling, grinding, and chiseling were also required before the piece was finished and it could be polished. Artisans carved the vessels with hollow drill bits made from long animal bones and reeds. Although there are several other monkey effigy vessels known to scholars, only one is a funerary offering. Explorers continue to guess whether the jar was made for members of the elite class and why they decided to use a spider monkey on the effigy. The ancient vessel was obtained by a doctor who saw it in the home of his patient in the late 1800s. Purchased from the farmer who found it on a hacienda in exchange for sheep, the museum later purchased the jar so it could remain in the country where it was made. That doesn't answer the question as to why the original creator created the monkey jar and how they managed to make such an exquisite piece with their limited resources. Kamchatka Peninsula. In 2013, archaeologists from the University of St. Petersburg discovered a strange object made from metal parts on a remote peninsula. The reason why this is so strange is that the object is some 400 million years old, and the components are gears that are similar to those found in a watch or computer. Inlaid in rock where it was found, the object is made from metal parts that formed a mechanism. The strange fossil, found by hikers, has hundreds of toothed cylinders making up the machine. Perfectly preserved in stone, archaeologists had to cordon off the area to prevent serious, curious onlookers. Could the object have been created 400 million years ago by some sort of intelligent being who had astonishing technological capabilities? Or could the object have simply fallen into a swamp or some other location that allowed it to reach fossilization and age in a shorter period of time? Whatever the case, this mysterious discovery continues to puzzle conspiracy theorists and archaeologists alike. Viking Rock Runestone. The climate crisis continues to be a topic of debate for environmentalists and the average Earth lover to this day, but a series of ancient carvings on a Viking monument may show that even then the ancient people were worried about the cold climate crisis. A 9th century stone monument found in Sweden is believed to have been erected by Vikings. Weighing 5 tons and standing over 8 feet tall, 2.5 meters, there are 28 lines in the runic inscription. But even if you understand the symbols, that doesn't even mean you may necessarily be able to decode it. Written on the stone are riddle-like messages dedicated to various Norse mythologies. With more than 700 runes and other characters, there is only one line that is damaged, but that doesn't make deciphering them any easier. Until early 2020, scholars were able to read the inscriptions, but they didn't necessarily know what they meant. However, a study by scholars from Swedish universities were able to decode the message, and what they found was quite interesting. Some of the inscriptions are about the anxiety of the author over his son's death, as well as fears of a new cold climate crisis. Based on archaeological research from the years 536 to 550, Scandinavia was bombarded with a series of volcanic events that led to lower than average temperatures. Crops failed, people went hungry, and there were mass extinctions due to the catastrophe. The population of the Scandinavian peninsula fell by 50% during this time. By analyzing the text and the archaeology of the area, as well as the history of religions, scholars were able to decipher the carvings. Before the rune stone was erected, a number of other events, including a powerful solar storm, a cold summer that impeded crop growth, and a solar eclipse just after the sunrise, may have been what inspired the creator of the runestone to carve the ominous messages. Any of these events would have raised fears of the locals who believed in the Great Winter, the coming of Ragnarok, or the end of the world in Norse mythology, and could be the cold climate crisis they were fearful of. Devil's Corkscrew. In the 19th century, when geologists began exploring the fossil beds found in Nebraska's Badlands, they came upon a curious group of spirals made from hardened sand. Nicknamed Devil's Corkscrews by local ranchers, the formations were believed to be the remnants of prehistoric plant matter or possibly sea sponges. It wasn't until later, when bones were discovered inside the corkscrews, that experts found the real culprit of these strange formations. An ancient animal similar to a beaver called the Paleocastor was the creator of the complex spirals, using them as homes. It wasn't until 1977, when experts found the signature teeth marks of beavers on the spirals, that they realized who had created them. With some standing 15 feet, 4.5 meters long, the spirals were created from 15 to 30 million years ago. Located in the Sioux country of Nebraska, they have two parts, namely the screw and a massive root that branches off from the lower end of the spiral. Located in about 500 square miles, 1,300 square kilometers of Nebraskan countryside, the spirals were first discovered in 1894 when an expedition set out to the Badlands of Wyoming, Nebraska, Rocky Mountains looking for fossils. After finding some large corkscrews, the formations, composed of quartz, were first labeled as the work of the devil because they were so curious and had no explanation. Initially, explorers believed that they were made by some supernatural being, but the area where these fossils were found was once inhabited by an ancient beaver-like creature that lived in the North American Badlands during the late Oligocene period. The corkscrew-shaped burrows had side nesting chambers and other compartments that allowed for water drainage and to be used for the animals' excrement. When they were later abandoned by the animals, tree roots grew into the spiral-shaped burrows and fossilized. If you want to see these curious formations, head to the Agate Fossil Beds National Monument in northwestern Nebraska to see these unique creations. Su-25 MiG-25. When the United States sent teams to Iraq hunting for weapons of mass destruction, they ended up finding something they did not bargain for. Dozens of fighter jets from Iraq's Air Force were found buried beneath the sand, including one Cold War-era MiG-25 interceptor whose tail fins were poking up from the sand. A number of MiG-25 and Su-25 ground attack jets were also found buried in an airfield west of Baghdad. Intelligence experts estimated that Iraq had about 300 combat aircraft before the war started, all from the 1991 Kuwait War. Most of them were Soviet-made or older French fighters, as well as some of the most advanced fighter jets produced in the Soviet era. They originally escaped detection during the coalition bombing campaign, with some being buried or hidden under trees covered with camouflage sheets. Those that were destroyed in previous wars were littered across the airfield, so it would be difficult for bombers to choose their targets. The Russian fighter jets were found after American forces had already been working in the vicinity for weeks without knowing the aircraft were there. Their discovery is a stark illustration of the difficulty American forces faced while trying to find weapons of mass destruction in the country. The ancient city of Archaim. Older than the ancient city of Troy, Archaim is a 4,000-year-old settlement in the Ural Mountains. But its most curious feature is a circle some 530 feet, 170 meters in diameter of ancient stones. The prehistoric settlement is estimated to at one time have 20 towns, flourishing during the times of the pyramids were being built in Egypt. A site of strange burials and cave paintings, debate still rages over who the people were who lived there. Discovered in the late 1980s by a group of archaeologists who had been dispatched to the area to plan a new reservoir, strange embankments were discovered of a circular fortified settlement and clay ramparts over a log frame. Family dwellings were also found, including hearths, cellars, and wells with early metal works and furnaces in each of the dwellings. More than 20 of the circular settlements have been found throughout the southern Urals in northern Kazakhstan, suggesting that the civilization was widespread with various townships built to house them. Ancient Stone Age cave paintings were found nearby, suggesting they depended on horses for chariots and farm work. A number of bodies were also found that had strange burial traditions, including the remains being placed in a fetal position while others were uniquely posed. The circular construction of the settlement also leads some to believe that it is tied to a Greek mythological city like Asgard and Atlantis, with some Russian writers believing its name Archaim combined the words for sky and earth. It could mean that the ancient people looked to the skies for wisdom and religion. Selenographia. A one-time painter to the King and the Prince of Wales, John Russell, was an artist with a keen interest in astronomy. So enthralled by the beauty of the moon, he created a lunar globe known as selenographia, which depicted the moon in intricate detail. A large lunar sphere that had a small terrestrial sphere, the globe was created to reproduce the motions of the moon with respect to the Earth. One side is illustrated with the other remaining blank, depicting how the moon is visible from Earth. Spending 30 years to perfect his map of the moon, Russell produced detailed drawings before he invented the selenographia. Made from paper mache and covered with plaster, the lunar sphere is mounted on a heavy brass hemisphere with parts that are cut away to show its details. Created in 1797, the portrait artist designed it to show the wobble of the moon as it rotates. He used a micrometer and telescope to obtain accurate measurements of the moon as he created the globe. Made from brass and paper, the terrestrial globe is considered the oldest three-dimensional representation of the moon, with its brass mechanism allowing it to turn. Offering Table of Defji. A rare round table made from white alabaster, the Offering Table of Defji is a remarkable piece from ancient Egypt. Carved with intricate hieroglyphs, the detailed surface has small compartments, each with the name of a dish, a drink, or a purifying agent. With over 90 products in total, the top of the table also has 7 shallow cavities that are intended to hold a special oil. But who exactly was Defji? Also known as the acquaintance of the king, highly revered by the great god and great one of the Upper Egypt 10, Defji's round offering table is a rarity because most tables made for a similar purpose were rectangular. The tablet is made of 5 inches, 12 centimeters thick alabaster and is 19.3 inches, 50 centimeters in diameter. The rare artifact is a stunning example of the ancient civilization. Dating back to the 6th dynasty, which ruled from 2323 to 2150 BC, the tablet is currently housed at the Museum of Antiquities in the Netherlands. Wondering what such a table was used for? A fundamental part of any ancient Egyptian funerary rite was to provide offerings to the deceased, and this tablet was used for that very reason, to ensure life after death for the deceased. Created during the time of the Old Kingdom, which is more known for the construction of the pyramids, the Tablet of Defji is another ancient relic that shows off the artistry of some of Egypt's most gifted stonemasons. With many prominent titles, Defji is a bit of an anomaly, but with such an intricate table created for him, he must have been a man of great importance. Which of these strange archaeological discoveries is the most impressive to you? From the most remote islands in the world to an extreme community at the edge of existence, here are 10 of the most isolated communities at the end of the Earth. Easter Island. It's hard to find a more isolated community than Easter Island. This place was so remote that the people who lived there basically went extinct because they ran out of resources. This is something that has not happened to any other society in the world. Imagine you lived on an island and suddenly you ran out of trees. It would basically mean the end of your civilization. Easter Island is located off the Chilean coast, and it's only about 64 square miles, 165 square kilometers. Not only is Easter Island one of the most remote places in the world, but it's also one of the most mysterious. There have been a lot of theories thrown around about the collapse and the society that lived there, and there have been plenty of conspiracy theories surrounding the giant statues that dot the entire island. The first inhabitants only arrived about 900 years ago, and the total population only ever increased into the low thousands. The island would have had chiefs, priests, fishermen, farmers, and people who built the giant statues. But because of their isolation from the rest of the world, these guys went in a totally weird direction. They were obsessed with building the huge Moai statues, and many believe this was their downfall. Today, there are only a few people still living on the island, and they mostly cater to tourists who fly in from mainland Chile. Utqiagvik, Alaska. Let's jump to the northernmost town in the United States. As you probably already guessed, this is in Alaska. It's the town of Utqiagvik. And every year from between November and January, there is absolute darkness. This phenomenon is known as a polar night, and for 2 full months, there is not a single drop of sunlight in this town. It's literally like walking into the heart of darkness. In terms of isolated communities at the edge of the world, if you're here in the winter, it literally feels like you're at the end of existence. It feels like the lights have gone out and they are never coming back on. The town was known as Barrow until it changed its name in 2016. It's completely surrounded by wild tundra and not accessible by road. You can only arrive by taking an airplane. Between December and March, the average high temperatures remains below zero. And according to Business Insider, this isolated region is home to only around 4,000 people. The local Inupiat people call this place home, and there are a handful of scientists who come to the area for special studies. To give you a rough idea of just how isolated this little town is, it's 500 miles from Fairbanks in Alaska, and Fairbanks is already a pretty isolated place. If you were to look at the map, you would see that this town is literally at the top of the world. It's located on the northern tip of Alaska. You can't get more northern unless you feel like taking a trip to Canada or Russia, and yes, it is located near the North Pole. But so far, there have been no sightings of Santa Claus. Have you ever visited Alaska? What did you do there? Did you see any crazy wildlife? What about glaciers? Let me know what you did on your trip in the comments below. Also, remember to subscribe if you have not already. There are lots more cool videos being released very soon right here on Talltanic, and you won't want to miss them. Itakotomi, Greenland. The town of Itakotomi in Greenland is one of the most isolated places in the world. Just getting to here is an adventure in itself. The closest neighbor to the city is the largest national park in the world. Other than a few humans that live in the town, this place is mostly populated by birds, polar bears, reindeer, and walrus. The city is located next to the largest and deepest fjord system in the world. Coming here really feels like coming to another realm of existence. It's almost like you're on another planet. Even though this town has a magnificent coastline, it's inaccessible for 9 months out of the year because of sea ice. No ships are able to dock in the town. That means for only 3 months, the town becomes one of the most important destinations for expeditionary vessels exploring the vast nature and wildlife of northeastern Greenland. The only way the community that lives here can survive is by hunting and fishing, and if you want to have some fun, your only options here are the wilderness. In the spring, when the ice is still thick on the ocean, many of the local people go camping on the ice or partake in dog sledding. Siwa Oasis, Western Desert. The Siwa Oasis is one of the most secluded communities in Africa. It's definitely the most isolated place in Egypt. It's located in the Western Desert, about 30 miles from the Libyan border, and the culture here is completely different from the rest of Egypt. It's nothing but a small oasis town in the middle of the desert. There is a small area with palm trees and pools, and all on the outskirts are sand dunes and desolation. The people who live here have developed their own way of living, their own language, and their own customs. It's one of the last places on Earth where women are pretty much never seen in public. The Siwa Oasis is also one of the best places to go on a desert safari. Just be careful that you don't get lost in the sprawling nothingness. Even though it's not exactly at the end of the world, when you're standing on the top of a sand dune looking out at miles and miles of sand, it definitely feels like you've reached the end of somewhere. Getting to this place is also a huge hassle. You have to take a train for 5 hours from Cairo and then a bus for at least 4 hours through the desert. As you can imagine, before trains and buses, this place was not visited a whole lot. That said, there is an ancient oracle temple in the oasis where it's claimed that Alexander the Great once came asking for advice, though it is little more than a ruin now. Villa Las Estrellas, Antarctica. Villa Las Estrellas is one of only 2 civilian settlements on the continent of Antarctica. As you can probably guess all on your own, this place is really at the end of the world in every sense of the term. This place has 14 homes, a single banker, 1 post office, a small school with 2 teachers, a church, and a small souvenir shop for the brave tourists who seek out this little town. Villa Las Estrellas actually translates from Spanish as Stars Town, most likely because at night there is almost zero light pollution, and so you can see the entire scope of the galaxy overhead. The population here is just around 100 during the summer, and there are even fewer people in the winter. It really makes you wonder what kind of isolated cabin fever type drama goes on here in the winter when there's only about 50 people around. La Rinconada, Peru. La Rinconada is the highest town in the world, completely isolated from the rest of Peru, way up in the Peruvian Andes. According to The New Yorker, this town in southern Peru is home to only about 50,000 people. It sits at an elevation of 16,728 feet, 5,100 meters above sea level. To put that in perspective, it's only about 3,000 feet shorter than the peak of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. At such an outstanding height, it is the highest town on the planet. It's located about 50 miles, 80 kilometers north of Lake Titicaca, and only 10 miles, 16 kilometers from the Bolivian border. But before you think about taking an adventure to this town, keep in mind many visitors have experienced crippling altitude sickness, which often comes included with headaches, nausea, and shortness of breath, all for free. But if you are particularly susceptible, a bad case of altitude sickness can also leave you dead. But don't be too scared. With a bit of preparation, you can absolutely visit this isolated town at the edge of nowhere. It feels like you're in a city out of a dream, with nothing surrounding you except the glory of the Peruvian Andes and the snow-capped mountain peaks. This town started as a temporary settlement, but from 2001 to 2009, the town population exploded by 230%. This is because the town is literally sitting on a gold mine. The entire town is basically full of gold miners who made the trip up the mountain to try and cash in on some of that gold action. Alert, Canada. The town of Alert in Canada is arguably the most isolated community in the entire world. It's located in the province of Nunavut, and it sits about 500 miles from the nearest community. But the people who live in this remote place are not there for fun, they're typically only there to work. This is because there is a weather and intelligence station located in Alert, and it's home to fewer than 200 people. Most of them are members of the armed forces, or they are civilian contractors. In the summer, there are 24 hours of sunlight in Alert, and in the winter there are 24 hours of darkness. If you're afraid of the cold, this is the last place you want to go. In the coldest months, the temperature drops to about -58 degrees Fahrenheit. That's enough to freeze the mustache right off your face. There are even icebergs floating around in the harbor. Plus, there is a single person whose job it is to keep the station safe from polar bear attacks, since they often roam extremely close to where people are working. If you want to witness a polar bear in the wild, this is the right place to do it. If you're wondering what the people here do for fun, the answer is not much. It's not like they have high-speed internet. Most of the people stationed here spend their time playing cards or participating in sports. There is also some pretty great hiking, but you always have to be careful of being eaten by a polar bear. Tórshavn, Faroe Islands. Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands is the smallest capital city in the world. It also has an extremely rich history. First, it was a very popular trading post for the Vikings back around 825 AD. It even housed the Norse government at the time. It's extremely isolated with a population of only around 20,000 people according to Insider magazine. Within just minutes of pretty much anywhere, you can be standing at the edge of existence looking out across the Great Blue Ocean. This place is so remote that they speak Faroese, an ancient language derived from the original Norsemen who settled on the islands over 1,000 years ago. It's very close to Icelandic, but after 1,000 years of isolation, it became its own kind of language. There are even unique horses known as Faroese horses that live on the island. They look pretty much like normal horses, but it's still pretty cool. This is definitely one of the quaintest towns that any person can visit. Tórshavn has wooden houses that date back as far as 400 years ago. While it might not be as close to the edge of the world as Alert in Canada, it's definitely isolated enough that if the world ever ended, this place would probably keep going on as if nothing ever happened. Pitcairn Island. The Faroe Islands are extreme, but Pitcairn Island is about as extreme as it gets. This tiny island only has 50 residents and can only be accessed with a yacht. There are no planes, there are obviously no roads, and there are no big cruise ships that land there. The island is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, more than 3,000 miles from any continent. It's literally a dot in the middle of the sea. The main industry on the island is tourism, and the inhabitants have an astonishingly long life expectancy. Most of the 50 or so residents can be expected to live for at least 90 years. This island also has a pretty cool history. Back in 1789, British sailors actually rose up and had a mutiny, and they ended up settling on Pitcairn Island and on Tahiti all by themselves. The mutineers who settled on Tahiti were eventually arrested by the British, but the few who settled on Pitcairn were never apprehended. They were able to build their own community completely free of any government ruling. It was not until 1838 that the island finally became known as British territory, but that did not stop them from doing their own thing. Today you will find that all 50 of the residents are actually descendants of the original mutineers. This may sound pretty cool, but I'm betting after all these years there are probably some serious issues with the bloodlines. I don't want to make any accusations, but somebody may have married somebody's cousin. Oymyakon, Russia. If you thought some of the places that I already mentioned are cold, just try to visit Oymyakon in Russia. This is the coldest inhabited town on Earth, and it's one of the most remote and isolated communities ever. There are only around 500 people living here, and they brave some of the worst temperatures imaginable. On the coldest day, the temperature can dip to a staggering -90 degrees Fahrenheit, -68 Celsius. That's not only cold enough to freeze your mustache off, but it's cold enough to freeze your whole face off. The average temperature is -58 degrees Fahrenheit, -50 degrees Celsius, and that is not much better. In terms of isolation, the only way to get to this place by car is by driving for 2 straight days down a barren road. And don't even try it in the winter when the road is covered in snow and ice. You would probably never make it. Just looking at some of the images of this place in the winter, it literally looks like a frozen dystopia. Still, life is apparently pretty normal. The area has a school, a post office, and even a bank. Plus, there are lots of dogs. Oh yeah, and literally everything is covered in snow. It's a miracle that life continues to go on here. As a side note, if you want to see some of the coolest ice sculptures in the world, Oymyakon is the place to do it. An ice sculpture can last for months here without ever thawing. If you had to choose only one, which of these isolated towns would you visit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. From the biggest shark ever caught to a mysterious beast accidentally hooked, here are 10 of the biggest catches that ever happened. Mako shark. One of the biggest sharks ever caught was ripped out of the ocean just recently in 2020 by a fisherman off the coast of Wales. This enormous mako shark is believed to be around 11 feet long, 3.5 meters. The mako is one of the fastest sharks in the ocean, and this one was caught only 35 miles, 55 kilometers from the coast. The man who caught it, named Rob Rennie, actually runs his own private charter boat. Rob spent 2 hours trying to get the creature into the vessel, but claimed it was actually too big, too powerful, and too heavy to get on board. There is video footage of him hooking the shark and dragging it alongside the boat, but Rob was forced to release the shark from the line and let it swim away. After 15 years of fishing, Rob told local news sources that the mako shark was the biggest catch of his career. As a side note, the current record for the largest mako shark ever caught using a fishing rod in UK waters is 500 pounds, 230 kilograms, but this dates back to 1971. Despite not being able to claim an official record because he never got the shark into the boat, Rob believes his shark could have weighed as much as 1,000 pounds. It was easily the size of a great white. Black marlin. An enormous black marlin was caught in 2018 that weighed 1,430 pounds. That is one big fish. As reported by ABC News, the fish was captured off the coast of Queensland, Australia, and it took a full 2 hours to catch. A little coincidental, the man who caught this giant black marlin is also named Rob, like the man who almost caught the mako shark. However, there was a bit of an uproar after the fishermen brought this giant beast back on their boat. Because the giant marlin is so impressively large, people were calling the fishermen cruel for killing such a majestic animal, bringing back the debate about whether or not it's appropriate to be killing fish for fun. However, Rob and his team of sports fishermen claim that the enormous marlin actually died during the struggle, and that is why they brought it back to shore. They typically catch really large fish, tag them, then release them, but this one was a total accident and nothing cruel happened. The anglers estimated the fish to be around 15 years old. It's the largest marlin to be caught in Australian waters in over 30 years. Bluefin tuna. A lot of us eat our tuna from a can, and when we think of tuna, we usually think of a tiny little fish, but you might be surprised to know that bluefin tuna are actually huge. 3 teenage fishermen recently pulled in an enormous 700-pound bluefin tuna after a 7-hour struggle. The tuna was so powerful that it managed to drag the teenagers 10 miles before they could reel it in. According to CNN, they were about 40 miles off the coast of Portland when they finally did get the fish on board their boat, and they were only 17 years old. Apparently, they didn't even see the fish until 6 hours after the fight started. The tuna stayed below 300 feet, 90 meters of water, and did not want to go to the surface. They were very lucky that they managed to keep their energy and keep the fish on the line. It was so big that they could not get it in the boat, and other people had to come in their own boats to help the boys get the tuna back to shore. It was quite a good payday for the boys as well, as they sold the giant fish to a local fish processing company for a pretty reasonable $2,000. Have you ever gone fishing? Did you catch anything good? Did you let it go, or did you eat your catch? How big was it? Tell me about it in the comments below, and then remember to subscribe if you haven't already. There are more great videos coming out all the time, but you have to subscribe or you might miss them. Whale shark. In China, fishermen accidentally caught a giant whale shark that weighed over 2 tons. The fishermen never went looking for the whale shark, but one bit through their net, which was packed full of fish, and ended up dying while trying to escape. So of course, they brought the whale shark up onto their boat. The shark measured 15 feet, 4.5 meters long, and was ridiculously huge. The fishermen apparently wanted to sell the giant shark, but it's actually illegal to catch or sell because it's an endangered species. Still, the carcass of a massive whale shark can be sold for somewhere around $30,000 according to National Geographic. This is in part because the population of whale sharks is extremely thin, with only a few thousand of them left. This makes them rare and very valuable if you can find the right buyer. The whale shark is indeed the biggest fish and the biggest shark in the world, and this is a rare catch that the fishermen probably won't be lucky enough to make again. What are they supposed to do with their catch? It's illegal to sell it because it's an endangered species, but letting it go to waste seems like a shame. Do they just let it rot? Just toss it back into the ocean to become food for the tiny marine organisms that feed off carcasses? The whole situation is pretty bizarre if you ask me. Goonch catfish. Anyone familiar with Jeremy Wade in his show River Monsters knows that this creature means business. Mr. Wade has caught some of the largest and strangest monsters that prowl the rivers of this world, and the biggest of them all is the goonch catfish, which lives in the rivers of northern India and Nepal. Most goonch catfish are actually caught by accident, and most are lost because they are so huge. The biggest one ever caught was 6.6 feet, 2 meters long, and weighed 230 pounds. It's not the biggest fish in the world, but it's definitely one of the biggest in any river. Jeremy ended up hooking one of these monster creatures in Nepal after investigating reports that men were being dragged into the water by a huge and ferocious fish. He had it on the line and fought with the animal, but the goonch eventually managed to break the line and escape. Even though Jeremy did not catch the giant fish he was hoping for, he has caught several small goonch catfish in the past when fishing in India, but none of them were over 161 pounds. It sounds like this one is going to go down in memory as the big one that got away. Mekong giant catfish. A fish believed to be the largest freshwater fish ever recorded was recently caught by a Thai fisherman. This happened back in 2005 when the fisherman reeled in a 646-pound catfish. It was a Mekong catfish, and it's considered to be one of the most threatened catfish species in the world because of habitat degradation. According to National Geographic, only around 11 fish were caught between 2001 and 2002. Then in 2003, fishermen only captured 6 giant catfish in Cambodia, all of which were released as part of a conservation project, but the catch in 2005 is definitely the biggest. The Mekong giant catfish was almost 9 feet long, 2.8 meters, and was the heaviest fish ever recorded since records began in Thailand back in 1981. Because the Mekong giant catfish is so huge and so rare, there is not much known about the ecology of the species. While at first the villagers had hoped to sell the fish to environmental groups, it died before it could be sold off, and so the catfish ended up being sold in pieces to the local villagers, and everyone had a good feast. Greenland shark. Believe it or not, after chasing giant catfish, Jeremy Wade actually left the rivers behind to hunt for the extremely elusive Greenland shark. And yes, he caught one. Jeremy had to travel to Norway to search for this ancient and mysterious sea monster. It took some time, but after reeling in about 50 miles, 75 kilometers of fishing line to check his baits, Jeremy hooked onto a shark. It was a huge struggle, but he did eventually reel in a 400-pound Greenland shark. These beasts usually live in extremely cold water about 2,000 feet below the surface. And being the guy that he is, Jeremy Wade actually put on a dry suit and got into the water with the shark. Later, Jeremy traveled to Greenland to catch an even larger Greenland shark. He ended up hooking one that weighed around 700 pounds and was estimated to be 200 years old. But unlike the first Greenland shark he saw off the coast of Norway, this one was mean. It had a seriously bad temper and acted more like a great white shark, and so Jeremy decided not to go swimming with it. In any case, this is one of the only records of a huge Greenland shark being captured. In case you were wondering, 200 years is not even that old for one of these sharks. They can live up to 500 years in the wild. Not only are they some of the biggest catches in the ocean, but they're some of the oldest. Not many animals can live longer than 500 years. Blue marlin. Another giant marlin was caught southwest of Portugal, but this was a blue marlin, and it happened on the last day of an angling adventure for a group of friends. The man who caught this enormous fish is a renowned angler from Georgia, and he was probably about halfway through catching it when he realized he had a marlin at the end of his line that weighed at least 800 pounds. Even before reeling it onto the boat, this guy knew he was dealing with a potential world record. It was a miracle that he managed to catch the thing using only light tackle. It was a 70-minute fight, but he did finally get the enormous marlin aboard. Once he did, it tipped the scales at an astounding 807 pounds. The International Game Fish Association has the current record at being 714 pounds, which was caught in 1990 on the Ivory Coast. Now it's just a waiting game as this dedicated fisherman waits to gain a world record. Swordfish. Just recently, a couple from Florida caught one of the biggest swordfish ever. According to the Tampa Bay Times, it took the couple 8 full hours to reel in the enormous swordfish. The monstrous beast actually dragged their boat a full 20 miles, 31 kilometers, before they finally won the fight. At the end of the day, the swordfish weighed 757 pounds, 350 kilograms, and this broke the previous Florida record, which had been set in 1978. It didn't only beat the record, it stomped the record. The previous largest swordfish was only 612 pounds, 278 kilograms. That means they beat the last record by over 100 pounds, 45 kilograms. However, the world record for the largest swordfish ever caught in history of the world happened in China back in 1953, and the swordfish weighed 1,182 pounds, 536 kilograms. This is according to the International Game Fish Association. Tiger shark. The last story on the list today also comes from Florida. According to Fox News, a single fisherman famous for wrangling sharks caught a giant tiger shark that he is claiming to be his biggest shark ever. The tiger shark that he caught was 13 feet long, 4 meters, and roughly 7 feet, 2.2 meters in girth. He hooked the shark in his boat and then reeled the thing in from the sand. Imagine standing on the beach and reeling in one of the biggest tiger sharks you ever have seen. The tiger shark is actually the second deadliest shark in the world, but the fisherman said he was never worried throughout the whole affair, even when the shark was looking at him while he struggled to get it unhooked and safely tagged. And in case you were wondering, no, the shark was not captured and eaten, it was tagged and released. This guy is a pro at catching sharks. He usually hooks them, tags them, takes a blood sample for research, and then lets them go. He actually works with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Apex Predator Tagging Program to promote the safe conservation of sharks. It's a heartwarming ending to a story that could have ended far more violently. What do you think about all these giant catches? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching and see you again soon. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for all the latest and greatest content.